Wait a minute. That's an airplane. Hey, welcome back to Frank's Model Works. I'm Frank. Yep, that's an airplane. I actually build airplanes too. I would say I've built more cars throughout my life, but I've been a model plane builder for a while. Uh, you know, as a kid, I built planes. I did a foray into planes from 2016 to 2020. I mean, if I'm being honest, if you can buy it in a hobby shop, chances are good I've been into it at some point. I've done trains, radio control planes, radio control cars, armor, sci-fi figures, planes, cars. Done it all. Enjoy every bit of it too. But this episode, I want to talk to you about this model plane. This is a Tamiya F4U-1 Birdcage Corsair. The Vought Corsair was developed during World War II because the United States Navy wanted a medium to longer range, stout, fast, high altitude capable fighter to take on anything that the Japanese had to throw at them. When World War II, on the onset of World War II, the Navy was kind of caught out there. The Wildcat, although eventually first bolstered through tactics and then later on through airframe and weapons upgrades, the Wildcat was lacking against the Zero, which was the primary fighter used by the Japanese Empire during World War II. Grumman responded with the Hellcat, and then later, it was a little too late to see action in World War II, the Bearcat. But Vought developed this, the F4 Corsair. This plane had the Pratt & Whitney R2800 double Wasp engine. It's a big engine, and it swung a big prop. 13 feet 4 inches in diameter. That necessitated that either the fuselage be lifted off the deck to clear the propeller, either by putting it on long landing gear, which is not really a good idea for a carrier plane because they're basically crashed into the deck, or, in this case, the utilization of an inverted gull wing. Now, you'll notice on the Birdcage Corsair, all Corsairs, that there are two small sections leading away from the fuselage that curve downward and then lead out. The leading edge is more parallel to the center line of the aircraft. That was to clear the prop and also not really affect the length of the landing gear. Interesting planes, very powerful. They had very rough torque roll characteristics that made them a little bit sketchy to operate off the carriers. So in the frenzy of World War II, the Navy if they operated them, they didn't operate a lot of them, but if they did, they operated them off land bases. And the Marines the Marines used them extensively throughout the Pacific during World War II, and their exploits are legendary. The birdcage in the Birdcage Corsair relates to the type of canopy that it has. I'm going to throw a picture up now of what I'm talking about. The Birdcage has a lot of framework in the canopy. And what they found was that the pilots lacked a lot of visibility to their rear. So later variants of the Corsair would have a bubble canopy so that the bulging area around the pilot's head, the pilot could turn around and look either side to see if there was anybody behind him. It increased their visibility. This being a very early variant of the Corsair didn't have that. There was like very slight bulge right over the pilot's head, and the visibility wasn't that good. This particular plane that I depicted using this kit, and let me tell you, the Tamiya kit is beautiful. Just a dream to put together. But this, I got this variation because I bought a Barracuda Decals decal sheet. And usually it's the story that attracts me to a subject in a model. And the description of this particular aircraft, which was known as the Ramblin' Wreck, is what really pulled me in. And I'll read it to you. The F4U-1 Corsair, bureau number 02386, Ramblin' Wreck, was attached to VMF 121, that's the Marine Corps fighter squadron, on Espiritu Santo, and this is how it looked on May 8th, 1944. In the one known photograph of 02386, that's the bureau number. It's basically like the serial number or the VIN of the aircraft. It's depicted as a war-weary Corsair, slated to be returned to the U.S. for refurbishment and reassignment to the training command. It was painted in a field-modified three-tone scheme of non-specular sea blue, intermediate blue, over existing light gray, or possibly newly painted white. The cowl itself was pulled off of another plane called Marine's Dream, and I'll show you the pictures of this in a second. And it had a silver prop hub. So once I hear war weary and survived the war, and at the time I looked for that one picture of Ramblin' Wreck. I actually found the picture. I didn't save it. I don't have it anymore, and I can't find it anymore. But the way it was pictured almost as if it had like rolled off of a dirt runway, and then somebody just threw a tarp over the canopy so that I guess it either wouldn't get rain in the canopy or it wouldn't overheat in the canopy inside the cockpit. It was a pretty ratty looking aircraft. So that was how I set out and my vision in recreating it in scale. So I'd like to show you some pictures now and describe to you how I went about doing that. All right, hold on. So here we have Ramblin' Wreck as seen from the left-hand side rear three-quarter view. As I was describing in the story about the plane on the decal sheet, it's in the late war three-tone scheme. Now, the only thing about this scheme, what they were talking about, light gray or possibly white, in the beginning of the war, Marine and Navy aircraft were painted in the intermediate or the lighter blue that you see on the tail, like on the rudder and the vertical stabilizer and the horizontal stabilizers of the plane. That was generally the color, maybe a little bit different, a little bit sandier of a blue with a light gray underside. Because there's only one picture of the Ramblin' Wreck, when they did a field modified paint scheme, what they could have possibly done was leave the original paint from the beginning of the war when this plane would have been first produced. They would have left that intermediate blue and then just painted the non-specular, which is the darker blue that you see over the wings and the front of the fuselage. Whether or not they left the light gray on the underside can't be known. And honestly, in the picture that I saw, it's hard to tell because of the way the photograph was taken. It's hard to tell if it's light gray or white. So I split the difference and I just painted it according to what the decal sheet said. Now you'll notice that this plane looks fairly messed up but usable. And that was generally the case with a lot of the planes in World War II. They weren't necessarily shiny, especially in the Pacific Theater, because they were operating from unimproved fields. At best, they would have they would have had Marsden matting, but for the most part, they're operating off of crushed coral runways. The planes would get beat up and chipped pretty easily, and the very frenetic environment that they were in trying to get these planes aloft and fight missions every day didn't necessarily put cleanliness and beauty at the forefront of importance. So you'll see that towards the front, right in front of the canopy, the windscreen, there's staining from where that's a large fuel tank that's outlined in light blue. That's a large fuel tank right there, and you'll notice that there's fuel staining coming down the side. That was actually something visible in the picture of Ramblin' Wreck. Now you'll notice that there's also a script that says Ramblin' Wreck. That's what gave it its name. But if you look on this picture, we can see on the nose is a oddly colored panel in the intermediate blue with a nose art of a young lady, and it's called Marine's Dream. Never one to let good nose art go to waste. I'm sure a very astute Marine grabbed the nose art when Marine's Dream was wrecked on landing and applied it to this aircraft so that it at least had something nice on its nose. As far as the construction of this kit, it was built basically right out of the box, and I generally, with my aircraft, I'll prime with Mr. Surface of 1500 black. I like the way that I can then use it to my advantage in order to provide tonal variation in the finish that as I apply it. So in the case of this Corsair, the bottom was painted. I used MRP paints throughout. The bottom was painted in U.S. Navy white. Now you'll notice that there's intermediate blue on the bottom of the wings. That was actually very, very typical of the time, where they didn't paint the bottom of the outer wings that would be folded up. And you'll notice in the wheel well of the tail wheel, there's a reddish color. That's salmon primer. Now, I don't know for sure if there was salmon primer on Ramblin' Wreck, but I wanted to use that color because there were examples of Corsairs that had that, and in order to achieve that color, I used Tamiya XF4 yellow green mixed 50-50 with Tamiya XF7 red, and I think I got the color right. As to whether or not it belongs there's no one who knows definitively. There's a lot of people who will have opinions and they might cite resources, but they won't be able to show me a specific resource for this airframe. So unless they can, which I'm sure somebody will try, that's where we are with that. Now, as far as the sighting window between the flaps, basically underneath the cockpit, I have a feeling I missed an opportunity because I left that fairly clear. That would probably, at this point, would have been painted over because it wasn't very useful. It would at least be a lot dirtier. And you'll notice the exhaust stains. That was done with MRP exhaust soot and some pastels. The paint job itself, like I said, was MRP paints, Barracuda decals, decals, and I tried to, as best as I could, show something that was serviced and flyable, but not necessarily pristine. There was also some controversy back and forth whether or not there was zinc chromate in the wheel wells. Some references said it was white, others said it was zinc chromate. I'm sure there's going to be plenty of people with their own opinions, but I did it to the best of the resources and references that I had on hand at the time. Now, in order to achieve the relatively tight but still slightly hazy demarcation between the camouflage colors, what I like to use is rolled up 3M poster putty. I roll it up into tight noodles, and I use that as a mask, as the demarcation line for the masking, and then I'll just block off the color that I'm not trying to paint over. That's how I get the slightly indistinct, but it's still rather sharp. I could probably do a little bit better with that. The chipping, I think I didn't do very well on the chipping. I think it's a little bit much for what I was trying to go for. Although it still wasn't that bad. I did limit it to areas that would be crew service, such as the wing walks where they would be loading ammunition and fueling the plane, and where the pilot would be climbing up into the cockpit. I never really got a chance to display this. I built this so close to the pandemic that I never had a chance. I actually gave it to a friend of mine before I had a chance to bring it to a show and see how it would do. But at the end of the day, I'm actually glad that I did this one. This was one of the only Corsairs I ever built, and I think it's the best Corsair I ever built, to be honest with you. The kit itself is an absolute dream to put together. I don't know if anybody else has come out with a Corsair since Tamiya came out with theirs, but after building this, I don't really see why anybody would need to. So if you're ever looking to build an F4U, they have the F4U-1, the F4U-1 Birdcage, the F4U-1A Corsair, which has the bubble canopy, and I believe they have an F4U-1D, which was one of the last variants before the end of World War II. By all means, buy any of them. They're all wonderful, and they also have them in 1/72 scale. You should definitely look into them. In the cockpit, you could see that I used some aftermarket decals for the dials. Those were by a company called AirScale. I got most of the stuff that I used for this model, and there would be links in the description. I got pretty much everything I needed for it from Sprue Brothers. You can also in this picture see a lot more of the staining coming out of that gas tank in front of the windscreen. And although it's not really in focus, you can see the chipping that I did. I did chip down to bare metal, because I did base wherever I was going to chip. I base coated in aluminum, then green zinc chromate as the airplane's primer, then the non-specular sea blue, the dark blue that you see there, and chipped along the way. And I don't think I did a very good job. I think it's inconsistent given the lack of chipping on the flaps for the most part, but there's always room for improvement in every model that you build. Also in the cockpit, we have some Edward photo etch pre-painted harnesses for the pilot's seat, and you can see I did some chipping to the pilot's seat and the armor plating behind his neck. I believe I also used an Edward photo etch details set for this cockpit, although it's been a while now. Getting old and I don't really remember. So if you remember a couple episodes back, I said I'd be building an FM1 Wildcat from Edward. I'm going to be employing a lot of the techniques that I use for weathering aircraft in that series, so be sure to look out for that. And whatever I use in that series is going to be basically the same thing that I used on this Corsair. I got to be honest with you, it's like this was one of the last planes I built before I came back to cars. I don't remember. And I don't have it here to look at it and show it to you. I'm trying to think of all the techniques that I used, and I realized it's probably just better to show you the pictures and then build an actual plane. So hopefully we'll be doing that at some point this year. Anyway, I appreciate you sticking in through this episode. It was a little rough, but I gotta find my feet with the aircraft again. With that said, as always, I got Frizzo's back. I don't know if he builds planes. He might. He's into trains, I know that. I appreciate your support. Till we speak again, my friends, take care of yourselves and be well.